what I've learned over the years is that negative emotions, they can only come from one spot. They come from a negative interpretation. And it's like, it's a pretty simple concept to see and to understand, but then to put it into your own life and to try to insert it into your own life all the time and hit the pause button on your emotions is really
tough. What a pleasure to turn the tables on Mark Bell here in your hood.
I wonder what that actually means. Turn the tables. Is that like a DJ
put you
reference
on the
or
spot,
something?
man? To put the needle on the record. Turn the tables. Mark Bell's on the B.rad podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure! It's been so fun to join you on the Power Project and the triple host format with Andrew and Nsima. We'll probably hear from Andrew, right? Because you just can't help yourself. You gotta weigh in sufficiently.
If there's anything that I can weigh in on, I will. But
he's a hype man. Every once in a while, he'll be like, "Yeah."
I mean, this is a guy. This is a guy who eats 10 eggs for breakfast.
Yeah,
and we just talked about that before we started recording. It's such a cool concept.
Liver King guy, Liver King eats like what?
Liver
9 eggs?
Liver King's his recipe.
It's like one shy.
It's in one of our books. He has 9 eggs, and here's Andrew with 10.
He'll get there eventually.
I know Liver King's going to listen to this, so Liver King, come on, man, step up.
Andrew's the reigning champ for now. I mean, until he gets knocked off.
Yeah,
but this concept of striving for a nutrient density diet, Mark, you and I have been talking about it like crazy because we got a book coming out pretty soon that's going to be setting the whole world straight. And it was just nice to connect with Andrew on that level and realize, man, what a fantastic way to start your day. And if the old timers are listening and thinking, wow, what's your cholesterol? I'm sure people ask you that after you tell them. What do you tell them, man?
Well, I mean, actually, because I don't truly don't get asked that very often, but I mean, if anybody did, I can literally show them my blood work and everything is in range. But then that brings up another conversation, which is, well, what does in range even mean? So I don't get caught up in any of that. I just make sure I feel good. If I'm performing well, whatever it is that I'm trying to work on, as long as everything's good, then I don't worry about it. But it is funny though, because my dad did have high cholesterol according to the doctors. So when I tell them like what I eat for like just in general, like I eat a lot of steak, I eat a lot of eggs, that's when like I have to be like, oh shit, I have to be careful who I tell, because sometimes it's like, you know, then my mom's like, oh, you can't be doing that.
Sometimes there are things to pay attention to if we could try to find some common ground in this space. That's the difficulty, right? Like it doesn't seem like much is agreeable. Somebody would be like, well, vegetables, they're okay. And then someone else would be like, no, vegetables have nutrients in it that are trying to kill you.
I know that used to be the common ground, the only one. Like I'm old friends with Rip Esselstyn, who's one of the leaders of the plant-based movement. His father, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn from the Cleveland Clinic, has done amazing work reversing heart disease. And so these guys are like at the pinnacle of the plant-based, you know, whole food, all that great attributes, get rid of the processed food. We agree on so many levels. And then we hit these checkpoints where, you know, Rip's talking on his TED Talk, which is seen by however many million people, that if you eat too much red meat and all that saturated fat, you're going to clog the blood vessels of your penis. You won't get an erection and it's just terrible. And it's like, wait a second, man. This is where the fork in the road splits, and it's a matter of life or death. And so sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know, I sure as heck hope that the people I follow in the world that I'm in are, you know, are right, because the stakes are high. But then if your blood work looks good, I mean, that's the highest level of medical scrutiny that we have. So what are you going to say? I mean, it's like, it's hard to dispute someone who's walking around feeling great. You must be doing something right.
I also don't know if blood work tells us a lot. You know, there's some people that I mean, you know, high-level triathlete people, marathon people, sometimes people just drop and we don't really know why, and they had a heart attack or something. We do know that sometimes overtraining could be some of the cause of that, but like, let's just face the facts. Human beings are complicated, and sometimes we just if something's just off for a fraction of a second, that could be it if you don't get medical attention right away. So there's all kinds of things that can happen. And I always like to try to go back to like, what's agreeable? What are things that make some sense? Does it make sense to eat piles of saturated fat all day? Maybe not, and if we put saturated fat and proteins in combination over and over and over again, with even something like a steak, like a ribeye, and with eggs and stuff like that, can we overeat for calories? I think we can. Can we cause damage to the heart? I don't really know. But it does seem that there is some information. I'm going to get some of this jumbled up because I don't remember all the different things, but I think if you have a cardiologist that's a little bit more modern, they'll tell you it's not just a cholesterol profile. You're trying to look at also the triglycerides. You're also looking at your blood pressure. You're also looking at your glucose, your A1C. Like there's kind of a combination of things.
Fasting insulin, Paul Saladino says, is number one.
Right.
And it's not on hardly any routine blood panels. You have to beg to get it. I begged my family practice physician to put it on mine and my wife's. And she's like, why do you need to look at that? I'm like, because Dr. Paul Saladino says it's the single best metric to track your heart disease and metabolic health. Okay, fine.
Right.
Yeah. So there's stuff you can look at.
And there's like ApoB and like there's all fractions of the cholesterol that you could look at, and it can maybe start to give you more information. What I would advise for people to do, if they do want to get into this rabbit hole and they do get their blood work done, don't just go and get your blood work done and then go on your merry way. See if you can see what diet would work for you to improve your health markers within your blood, within a guided relationship with whomever is interpreting your blood with you. Now, that can be complicated too, because you don't know if you're getting steered in the correct direction, but hopefully you found a good company and you found someone that you can trust, and you can go back and forth on your goals. And you could say, look, man, I want to be a 270-pound savage powerlifter, but I don't want to die young. Can you help keep me in check with some of this? And they could look at some of your numbers and say, hey, man, like that's out of range. But the other person could say, I got a contest coming up. I'm a little heavier than normal. I'm utilizing more performance enhancing drugs than normal. I'm eating more than normal. But as soon as the contest is over, I'll clean it back up. Those kinds of things.
Yeah. I also feel like we get so deep into the science, and people are standing behind all this scientific reference to argue there. Speaking of RIP again, there's a lot of science supporting this idea that the whole food plant-based diet is the way to avoid heart disease and perform at your peak and all this stuff. And then there's a whole bunch of evidence at the animal-based diet and the examples. So I think it's good to look to people who are actually out there doing something. And in terms of, checking your blood and tracking your health that way, I'd also like to know, can you lift some heavy weight up off the ground? What is your time in the mile? The Cooper Institute and Texas A&M did this huge study with thousands of people, and they measure mile time at age 50 as a tracker for health and longevity and health potential, how well you're going to be, what's your potential to live to age 80. And they said it was the best. It was better than anything in the blood labs, and just go out to a track and run 4 laps. And if you can break 8 or break 9 as a female, break 8 as a male, you're in the superior category. You're looking really good to go till 80 nice and strong. And if you can't break 12 or can't break 13, you're in the needs to improve at risk category. And it's, that's sort of less disputable than any blood panel or any diet intervention or study relating to what people eat. It's like, here they are performing. And
it tells you at the baseline that these are people that think about this quite a bit. Somebody that's running those times in the mile, those are people that are probably thoughtful about getting some sort of exercise in, getting some sort of training in, making sure they're not overeating and things of that nature. But
healthy user bias for fast mile runners. That's right.
I mean, it is like, it's ridiculous that we have to have evidence of particular ways of eating that have been around forever. Like when you pretty much just say, hey, look, man, eat natural foods. And some people go a little haywire with what's natural and so forth. But like, let's just say you got meat, you have some dairy, you have some fruit. Maybe there's some room for some vegetables. Maybe there's a little bit of room for some rice and potatoes and stuff like that too. Who gives a shit? Not a huge problem. And maybe once in a while you have 3% of your food be just completely off plan. Let's just pretend it never happened. Not a big deal. Doesn't make up a huge percentage of your food. It's kind of ridiculous that people want a study done on that, because that's the way that humans have been eating for quite some time. And it appears that as long as you're not overeating on a daily basis, you should be okay. And there's certain situations where people do get diabetes where they, I guess by definition, they wouldn't necessarily be overeating because they're not overweight. Mm-hmm. So with the exception of some of those folks who have kind of over carbohydrated themselves, there's really not a ton to concern yourself with if you are prioritizing protein. I think protein is kind of the key ingredient. Let's go after protein, about 30 grams of protein per meal. Let's have meals at meals. Let's get rid of snacks. And when you go 30 grams of protein per meal, you start to end up in this category of potentially getting in 3 grams of the most important amino acid that you can get, and that's leucine. So by having leucine in the body, you're going to help protect your body against kind of breaking down the muscle, especially if you're somebody that's lifting. You're going to be able to have more muscle mass for longer. Being stronger is always advisable. I say this all the time. Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. And that alludes to the fact that I never met anybody who was like, man, I wish for that football game I was a lot weaker. That would have been super beneficial. I wish when I fought that guy that I was a lot weaker and slower. You know, I wish that when I had cancer, I wish I was weaker. It would have been great to go into cancer at 140 pounds rather than being 250 and jacked. No one's ever going to say that because we need that muscle mass. It's a protective mechanism. It's something that allows us to flourish, allows us to go on. And now, you know, nowadays where you're starting to see more and more guys that are 40, 50, 60, it's not just a TRT thing that's going on. There's a lot more people that are more conscious and that still want to get after it into their older ages because they're recognizing something that I think is really important. You don't just fall apart when you get old. It's the bad habits that you run into that potentially are going to cause you to fall apart much faster than just old age. Old age takes kind of a long time to really show up at your doorstep and say, hey man, you know, things are getting really rough around here. But I know for like yourself and for myself, you know, sometimes people are like, how did you transfer into like running? Like, I don't understand. Like your knees don't hurt. You don't have Achilles problem or you don't have a problem with your foot. I'm like, I've been exercising forever. Like, what are you talking about? Running is pretty easy. Now it's not easy for me to start to run really fast for really long distances and those kinds of things. But the pressure involved with running so far, I'm still new to it. So some people might be like, just wait, bitch, you're going to get jacked up. But so far, you know, I've run about 4 miles every day. I feel really good. I ran 4 miles twice yesterday.
Dang.
I'm just letting it all happen because it feels really good at the moment. And I have gotten dinged up, of course, end up with ankle things and calf things and shin things here and there. But it's been good for the most part. But I think it's every human being's job to make yourself super resilient. And what we're talking about all the time, which is at the forefront of everything, which should be the focal point of everything, which is stress mitigation. Why do you want to, quote unquote, be less fat? You want to be less fat so you can mitigate stress easier. You want to be healthier so that the things that come into your life, which you may interpret as negative, and that's kind of up to you. It's the things I've learned over the years. But if you interpret something as negative, how far does that reaction go? Does that reaction alarm you? And now you're yelling at somebody else, or now you're texting somebody something that maybe if you just took a beat and took a moment, because we don't have to be dragged around by our emotions all day long. But that's what I'm seeing so many millions and millions of Americans doing. They're taking certain situations that happen because they took a loan or a car payment out. They had no business doing this in the first place. It's like it's the first time they ever made money. Now they got a $500 a month car payment. It's like, dude, you just got your head above water. That is so cool. You don't need to be carrying a 45-pound dumbbell with you while you're trying to tread water as well. And that's what a lot of people are doing, but they just keep taking their problems, sweep them under the rug. Oh, I'll pay that tomorrow. Oh, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll start my walk tomorrow. Sweep it under the rug, sweep it under the rug. Over a period of time, you start to become very fragile. And all the stresses that come at you, rather than trying to deal with them, somewhere inside, you know that you're fragile, so you don't deal with them because you're going to wait until tomorrow to get to them. They pile up, they pile up, they pile up, and you're just a stress bomb walking around all the time, ready to explode.
So you become fragile by avoiding and carving this path where you don't have to face up to things, including lack of fitness or lack of dietary scrutiny.
Neglect is the most powerful, in my opinion. It's the most powerful and one of the most evil things in this world. To neglect a child, to me, is like, I don't know, I never been abused. I never been neglected, but I do know some people that have been in both cases, and some people that have been neglected. They're like, I'd rather have my parents punch me in the face. That's how tough it can be for people. That's what a hard interpretation that is, to have neglect, but yet we neglect so many things in our own life, and we know that we neglect them. That's why we won't face them head to head. You know that you're supposed to run. You know you're supposed to eat better. What about, when family members see you sometimes, they're like, oh, great. Here comes Brad. And they're like,
what lecture does he have packing today? And
they feel like they got to yeah, man, I was going to start last month. And you didn't even say anything yet. You're like, hey, Bill, how you doing?
Just ready.
Yeah. They're ready to divulge information because they feel that kind of guilt on the inside. But let's not get it twisted. We don't need you to do everything, but we need you to do something. So stay connected. Hold tight. I just had a friend recently. He lost his dad. He's like, man, I got to admit to you, I fell off plan and things are. I said, look, we're talking about a couple days of nutrition. Right. Not a huge deal. But if we're starting to talk about a couple days of nutrition, a couple days of walking, a couple days of lifting, can we keep one thing in? Can we keep something in? Can we agree upon, hey man, get in a mile walk, get in a mile walk each of these days, even though you went through a tragic situation. Fuck the diet for a couple days. Don't worry about it. Let's get back to it in a couple days, but you got to stay tethered to something. Because if you're not out there doing the work, as we were talking about with the running this morning, if you're not out there doing the work, you can't expect to have any of the results. And this world and your health and your body does not care the excuses that you have. The work has to get done. The result is still going to be you being less healthy, even though you're like, yeah, but wait a second. You don't understand my situation and how delicate it is. Some serious shit has happened to me. No, it doesn't matter. It's regardless of that. And that's why you have to figure out how can you mitigate stresses in your life.
It seems like that's a sticking point, though, is where I'm armed with a bunch of excuses. And like you said, before I start talking, someone's going to preempt me with whatever. But
it's hard to take that first step, right?
Yeah. How do we get past that where you just blow right through the excuses and take the first step out? You
lower that barrier of entry in whatever way you can. You rip the top of the you kind of rip the top of it off by taking some of the bite out of it, some of the sting. What's hard about running? Well, if I'm to think about running, I'm thinking, I know some people that run. I know Zach Bitter. So what's hard about
run with him?
Yeah. What's hard about running? Well, shit, man, that guy runs really far and he runs for a really long time.
Fast.
Why? Why so fast? Why is he so good? When I think about stuff like that, I like to break things down into their simplest form. All right. Brad Kern came in here. He saw me at 300 pounds and he said, Mark, it'd be a great idea if you got yourself in some shape where you could get a little bit of running in. And I thought, man, screw Brad Kern. Why is he telling me to run? I want to be jacked. But if I'm to think about it a little bit more, and I said, he said to run, but he didn't say in which way. He didn't say for how long. So I think the next time I'm on a walk, I'm just going to do a little bit of what someone else would consider if they saw me from across the street. They say, that guy's jogging. That guy's moving. That guy's running, right? So just faster than a walk. Something where the feet are coming off the ground a little bit. You got a little arm swing going. Just a little tiny baby jaunt. And can someone do that for 10 seconds? I think most people listening right now, are always exceptions to the rule, but most people listening right now can probably handle that. Can you do 10 seconds on, 1 minute rest, 10 seconds on, 1 minute rest, whatever you need to do. That's how my running journey started. And that's how anything I've ever stuck with for a long period of time started. Luckily for me, I had 2 older brothers that showed me the ropes with weights, but I didn't know what was going on. And that was a beautiful thing. They just handed me like, a curl bar. And they're like, curl this a bunch of times. And I wasn't thinking like, I got to do 100 pounds for 15 reps. I was like, well, just get through this set. Oh shit, they handed me another one.
You're just a kid when you started, huh?
Yeah, just a kid and just having fun. And so whatever it is, that thing that you are really nervous about or scared about, could be public speaking. Could be terrified to do some public speaking. Maybe you take your phone, start recording yourself talking to your phone, and maybe you don't ever show anybody because you're like, this is just awful. Can't even believe how bad this is. But what if you did that for a minute and tried to perfect the sales pitch over time, or you have some sort of talk that you have to do at work or something? Over time, you're going to mitigate that stress. You're going to lower your anxiety over that thing. And as you do it more and more and more, you get more used to it. And people will say, hey, that was unbelievable. And you'll look around the room and be like, talking to me? That's what will happen for people. And running with you today was so awesome because I know the different things that you've done as an endurance athlete. So I think it wasn't like I was hanging with you. It wasn't like you were trying to.
No, I told Andrew, I feel a little worn out because I went farther than usual because now the power lifter here is going out and busting out a 4-miler. I'm usually at 1.5 or 2 it's part of my sprint training. I do a little bit of endurance, but you're getting after it. I'm impressed. Everybody
has access to some people in their life that they know lift, that they know walk, that they know run,
eat well, whatever it is.
Get around some of these people here and there. You know, like your buddy that's your buddy or your uncle or whoever that's obsessed with like eating properly. Take him out for lunch.
Grill him.
And then he's going to be like, you can't go to lunch. You know about seed oils?
There's no public restaurant that's suitable. Yeah. Come over. I'll make him lunch.
Let's get a coffee. Is it organic coffee? Does that coffee have mold in it?
Fair trade stamp. Yeah.
What kind of water's in there?
It's getting rough. So you mentioned your starting point a little bit with the brothers, the Bell brothers, the notorious guys that were doing the wrestling in the basement. And maybe you could just take us through a little bit of this journey with the highlights of, coming to be a top level power lifter. Now you continue to broaden your horizons and take on new challenges.
Yeah. I think the story, and maybe some other people can relate, I was like the runt of the litter. I was the youngest.
Hard to imagine that now, but
my oldest brother, Mike, he was about 8 years older than me. And so he was too big to he was too big for me to wrestle with and stuff. But him and Chris were always at ends. They were always beating the crap out of each other, sometimes for fun and just messing around. But Mike was really big and Mike was really strong. I think maybe at 15 years old, he's about 6 foot and 240. I mean, he's just a monster. And so they were always wrestling, and then I would jump in and Mike would play with me, and then Chris would probably hurt me or Chris's friends. And then Mike would beat everybody up in the room. He was just
that's how it went.
Yeah. He's just
then it was dinner time.
Yeah, exactly. We can't have any of this. And it was hard for me to try to get a place at the dinner table to be able to eat enough because those two were chowing their food down. And both of them, they had a different level of confidence than what I had when I was young. So they both talked a lot, and I was always just listening, watching them go back and forth. And my mom talked and my dad talks a lot. So I couldn't get a word in, so I was always just I was a little bit more of an observer when I was young. And with Chris and Mike both being into lifting, they're like, our little wimpy brother, he's not gonna, this is unacceptable. He can't go around looking like this. He's got to lift. And I was a decently sized kid, but I didn't, I'm 12 or 13 and I'm kind of getting skinny fat, and so they got me into some lifting. My dad, I don't know how my dad knew what weights to get, but he bought a beautiful weight set. He bought a nice squat rack. He bought high level not anything crazy expensive or anything, but he bought a really nice weight set. And I always look back at that. I'm like, how the hell did he know what to get? Because even for now, that would still be a nice way to start. So the weights were just there. And oddly enough, or interestingly enough, We had weights on one side, and on the other side was business. My dad has a tax practice. So I always saw the combination of weights and business going hand in hand all the time. If I wanted to walk outside, I had to walk through my dad's office. So sometimes I'd be in the gym doing some stuff, and I grew up in New York. It'd get kind of hot and humid in there. So sometimes I would walk outside for a minute, drink some water, cool down, and come back through. And I saw him always wheeling and dealing. And
can you depreciate that? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I saw him counting checks all the time, and I would get done with workouts sometimes, and I would sit across from him, and I'm like, I don't know, 14 or something. And he would put these checks down, and this check is for $375. This other one's for $200. This other one's for $100. And I noticed the names on there, and a lot of them had our last name on there. I'm like, is that from Uncle Jimmy? And he's like, yeah. I was like, he's your brother and your best friend. I was like, why are you hustling him for money? He's like, well, it's a business and they want to pay me. He's like, I've tried to tell most of them not to pay me, but it was a bunch of friends and a bunch of family members' checks that he had across the board there. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But what he was explaining was, I'm providing a service, So he's like, he goes, when you're older, if you ever want to have a business, if you just provide a service and it's a good service, people want to pay for it. So he's like, even though I've told your aunts and uncles and stuff before that they don't need to pay me, he's like, they're insistent upon it because they'd have to go pay someone more money anyway. So I think they appreciate that I do this work for them. And I was also, kind of curious too. I was like, I made like $375, but that person, they weren't really here that long, were they? He's like, no, I just had to go through some of their files. We did a lot of that work last year too. And he's like, it was pretty quick and easy. So he's like, I don't know, I was maybe working with them for like an hour. I'm like, $375 in an hour? Like, that's crazy. What the hell's going on here? So my mind was kind of, thinking about a lot of that stuff. But back to the actual gym stuff, I started out with some pretty good foundation because I heard about things like 5 sets of 5, the Bulgarian program. And I remember I read Powerlifting USA and I read some of these different magazines, and I never got into bodybuilding. I got into powerlifting. My brothers were more into strength, and that's what I wanted to do. And I remember going into the summer from, I think 6th grade to 7th grade. I'm like, man, I cannot wait to get out of school because once summer starts, I'm starting this Bulgarian program and I can train 3 times a day. I'm like, this is going to be so sick because you could lift heavy in the morning and then you have an assistance stuff in the middle. And then at the end of the day, you would do like a lighter version of what you did in the morning, and it would kind of repeat and it cycled through, and it taught me about percentages and all kinds of different stuff. And I had it all calculated out. I can lift this weight right now, I don't know, let's just say 300 pounds on a certain lift. And I was like, by the end of the summer, I'm going to be doing 455, cause you keep running the program and it gives you this kind of end result that you should get. But obviously your luck runs out at a certain point. Your body just doesn't get better forever all the time, unless you're some of these all-time greats like Ed Cohn and some people like that. So I would run the program and I would go from 300 to 315. I'd be super disappointed, but it was only in 8 weeks, and then I would do the program again and gain another 15 pounds of strength. I was like, man, these programs suck. They don't do anything. But I just gained 30 pounds of strength on something that I was kind of already pretty strong at. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth and learned. And then my brother and I also, we went to Mid-Hudson Bodybuilding, which was a gym in Poughkeepsie, New York that we frequented. And then also another gym, which was a powerhouse gym called the Atrium, which we had a coach. And that coach taught us about bench, squat, deadlift. Before that, we didn't really know anything about the form. We just kind of did it, and we were horrible. But this coach taught us about the form and technique. He would write out programs for us. And the cool thing is that me and my brother never did the programs. We only did the main movement, and then we always left. And he was always baffled by us getting stronger because he's like, you guys never do the assistance exercises. They're like, those are too light and they're a waste of time. We're going to go home and eat some pizza and ice cream. We didn't have any knowledge of, nutrition or anything like that, but it worked. And we were young and we got bigger and stronger by doing some of that.
So bodybuilding is the familiar posing on the stage and looking at your muscles and getting judged by the judges. Powerlifting is much more of a
Squat.
Organized, competitive
squat,
event.
bench, deadlift. You get 3 attempts at each one, and then they take the best lift that you did in each one, and they give you something that's called a total. So they add all those together.
So that's straight up. How much can you lift in these 3? And you're also competing in a weight class, I suppose?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of different weight classes. I mean, it goes all the way from like 114 pounds all the way to super heavyweight. Kind of a funny thing about powerlifting is that there's like a 308 weight class too, because
it's a weight class, folks, not a super heavyweight.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's funny. You gotta trim down to make the 308 cutoff.
And that's like right where I usually sat too. And I would compete at like 320 pounds when I was in the 308 weight class. It's just so funny to think about. Powerlifters are big human beings. A lot of the heavier powerlifters. And the strongman athletes are like that too, but the strongman guys are even bigger because they're usually really tall as well. It's not uncommon for some of those guys to be 350, 400 pounds. I mean, imagine some of those guys trying to run
4 miles twice in one day.
Yeah, or like,
not going to happen.
Or like run, bike, and swim. It would be like the craziest. No. Even if it was just tiny distances, it would
crush the bike. The top tube would bend.
Hafthor Bjornsson versus Eddie Hall would be the ticket, right?
So is being super huge going to be an advantage on lifting up more raw weight? Don't they have longer arms? Is there sort of a build that might be an advantage?
So in terms of powerlifting, like if you and I are just talking and you're like, man, I want a stronger bench press. The fastest way for us to get you a stronger bench press would be just to have you gain some weight. Let's just put you in a caloric surplus. And that kind of goes for like somebody that wants to get a bigger back or somebody that wants to get, let's say, bigger arms. Go into a nice caloric surplus, still eat healthy. Like let's just kind of get rid of old practices and let's just ditch doing stuff that's unhealthy. You still want to stick with the kind of the cleaner foods. You don't want them to have a negative impact on you, even though you're only 25 or however old someone might be. But get yourself in a caloric surplus, eat up a bit, train. But if you're trying to train and get stronger and you're doing intermittent fasting and stuff like that at the same time, I'm not going to tell you that it's not going to happen, but it's just going to be a lot harder. And also, if this is a new venture for you, why make it so difficult? I like to try to simplify stuff. I like to, I don't want to take on 17 different things at one time. It gets to be really complicated. Something like jujitsu or something like running where you're working on it and you're working on the form and technique. How many things could you work on at a time with running? Well, you got your right foot, you got your left foot, you got your right arm, your left arm. Like you might be able to work on like 2 or 3 different things, but it's not going to be like a great workout. It's going to be a workout that you designated to you working on your technique. It's a technique workout. It's not like a full blast. Like full blast workout where you're trying to go hard would be more something where you're like, I know I don't run the best, but I'm just going to utilize what I got for now. And I'm going to work on fixing that some other day, just like you might have to do sometimes with your jumps, right? You got to make these compromises here and there because you're like, I'm in competition now. There's no time for me to really worry about which way I turn my foot or the fact that I got plantar fasciitis or whatever. You got to kind of go for it, right? So I like to try to break things down into their simplest form. When it comes to strength training, it comes to getting stronger, the first easiest thing that you can do is probably lean into gaining some weight. If you don't want to gain some weight, the second easiest thing to do, and I guess it could be on par with the first one, is just to simply move into doing triples and singles and stuff like that. Because a lot of people don't ever train that way.
What are triples and singles? Yeah,
just doing 3 reps, 2 reps, 1 rep, and getting those numbers up higher. I talked to you the other day about Prilipin's chart. It's a really famous chart that was created by either a Romanian coach or a Russian coach. And the interesting thing about the original chart is that the chart doesn't have 100% on it. You're looking at it, you're like, that's interesting. It's got 90 and 80 and 70. And it's because they looked at 100% as not being, you see the chart right there.
If you're watching on YouTube, we have Prilipin, Prilepin chart. And it's just it's calculating percentage of your absolute maximum and then suggested reps and sets. With it just goes up to 90, not 100. Love it.
So sometimes, like when you get a training protocol from somebody, especially when it comes to lifting, the coach, a lot of times he's not going to include the fact that, like, no matter how strong you are, you should always warm up with the bar. That's a belief of mine. Some people might warm up with something heavier, but I always liked utilizing the bar and just moving it around in bench, squat, or deadlift just to see what's there.
Warm up with super lightweight, you're saying.
Yeah, move it around and go, oh, that's weird.
Empty bar.
That's weird. What's going on with the shoulder today?
Right.
So there's not so much significance on it to where anybody even registers at it as counting as anything. But I think Prilipin, in making that chart, I think he thought the same way about 100%, all the way to the point where he thought it was kind of, I don't want to say useless, because obviously there's utility in going 100%, feeling yourself going that hard or that fast. There's definitely a lot of benefit to it. But he didn't even have it on the chart, because he also recognized the other thing is that when you give an athlete something, athletes are really dumb, right? Like
more is better.
And I'm speaking for myself, like
me too.
If you gave me a list of things, I'm looking at it right away and I'm like, I could do way better than that. And I'm going to want to try to give it a little extra oomph. So somebody that is trying to get stronger and or trying to get bigger, or even if they wanted to stay the same weight but still increase their strength, if you follow some of the information on that chart, you do 1 to 3 reps. There's no reason to go above 90%. And in fact, if you're going to do, like, let's say 3 sets of 3 reps, you want your last rep of your last set to look like the first rep of your first set. And that is, in my opinion, not an always, because I'm not a huge fan of absolutes, but if you follow that in most of your lifting career, you will stay healthier for longer, and it will be easier for you to get stronger faster by you sticking to having really wonderful, beautiful form. What happens over a period of time as you start to really lock your form and technique in, the only person that knows that you have bad technique is you, because it's undetectable by other people unless they're there with you, unless they've seen you lift a million times. Not a million times, unless they've seen you lift a lot. So I had to make those corrections sometimes myself in my lifting career as I got better. And so that's why it's important that you go around with like-minded people. Louis Simmons would say, if you walk with the lame, you develop a limp. So you want to be moving with people that can move a similar speed to you, or even every once in a while, people that can move a lot faster than you. If we go on that 4-mile run and we do it every day, I know that there's like science about training these heart rate zones and stuff like that. But if we go out there and we go with some 25-year-old guy who runs that arboretum at a 6-minute mile pace, like all the time, like it's nothing, even if he slowed down to entertain us and was just a little ahead of us, we'd run faster the whole time. And we'd probably get better. But maybe at a period of time, we'd also like decline because we're smashing ourselves too much. But I would imagine in the beginning, I'd get a little bit better. So it's important that you get around people that know what they're doing and people that are a little bit better than you. So that would be kind of the third thing. So number 1, gain some weight, be in a caloric surplus. Number 2 is to, do to 1 to 3 reps. And the third thing is to get around some awesome people, some people that are really interested, really into. You've mentioned this a bunch, which I thought was amazing. You got around, and you mentioned a couple guys would take off after a while and not hang with the crew, because sometimes being with the crew is also to your detriment. And that's really, now you're getting to some high level, really smart stuff.
Yeah, you got to pick and choose. And the motivation.
Don't always want to compete.
The camaraderie is so great, but you really have to put yourself first and make good decisions all the time. I talk to young athletes a lot that are heading off to college to go on the running team. And that was a disaster for me at UC Santa Barbara. I just got destroyed by the system and the programming that didn't have that individualized element. And so, get all the camaraderie you need, but when you need to back off, you can still enjoy the camaraderie. You tone down that competitive intensity, and then you're, making the most of the environment as well as, your personal responsibility to yourself and your own voice.
Yeah, I agree with that a ton. And I just think like, let's just try to simplify stuff. You know, what is it that what are you trying to address? What are you trying to get better at? Trying to get better at lifting, trying to get better at running. If you're trying to get better, if you are trying to prioritize something, well, let's work on the lifting first. You know, if that's what you want to get better at, let's prioritize that. You're like, yeah, but I want to be fit and I want to run. And well, just wait a minute, you know, like let's just lift for a couple weeks. Let's say that you're a runner and you're listening to this right now and you wanted to get into lifting, but you kind of have and haven't, you've been in and out a bunch. Just go and lift about 3 or 4 days a week, make a commitment to it. Stop running. I know you're sad, but just stop running. Pick something else, walk, maybe ride a bike, do something that's different than running. Get off your feet, stop pounding the lower back, the ankles, all that stuff. Lift for 6 weeks, put some effort into that, work on the progress there, come back to running. And I promise you will be better. It might not happen right away, but we put too many time constraints on stuff. If you just say, I don't care, let's take your high jump as an example. If you say, you know what, I don't care how long this takes, but I will be the best in the world at high jump. What if it happens when you're 80? You know, at 80 years old, I'm imagining like people probably aren't jumping too crazy. I know it's competitive no matter what age group you're in.
You know what the record is in the 95 plus
somebody did like 7 feet.
High jump division? 0.9 meters, which is less than 3 feet. And so my goal is to jump into bed when I'm 95 and I will be a record holder. That's all I got to do is just, you know, get up onto the mattress on a typical high placement bed. So is nice to be in the age groups because, you know, there's attrition. And if you stay fit and healthy, then you can step right in there.
Yeah. I love that. So I think if we, you know, maybe right now, maybe somebody is really struggling with weights and they're like, man, I'm a wimp. I'm kind of a skinnier person. Well, that's fine. And that's maybe just where you're at the moment. But how much time and effort have you really put into it? When you put some time and effort into it and you get locked into it and you make that kind of the main focus for a bit, you'll be shocked at what you can do. And again, if you're trying to like look for results in 8 weeks, 12 weeks, even 6 weeks, which I suggested, you're going to get some results in those 6 weeks, but they're not going to be monumental. But again, once you start back on running and you're able to run and lift and go back and forth between running and lifting without any soft tissue injuries, like zero, none, zilch for weeks on end, you have found the magic recipe. You made yourself more resilient. And the stress mitigation that you have to lifting, it's like if you went to run with a friend, you might tell them, oh yeah, man, I trained legs today like crazy, you know, because you'd want that buffer to tell your buddy like, yeah, I might be kind of slow today. But imagine it's 5 years from now and you've been having that routine normal. You wouldn't mention to him anymore because it wouldn't make any difference. It's not going to slow you down. We talked to Nsima this morning, who also went on the run, who did really impressive, by the way. He said he did 31 minutes and he said they did the whole thing nasal breathing. What a beast. Freaking jacked. But you know, it's going to take time to get better at stuff. It really is going to take time. And you have to just understand that, lower your expectations. When I first started running, it was just biting off a little bit at a time. I would run from a rock to a stop sign. I'd run from a stop sign to a house. I'd run from one tree to the next. And it was like, we're talking sometimes 25 yards. You know, sometimes it was just, because I would go to run and I was like, man, that doesn't feel good on the ankle. Wow, that's really jamming my ankle into the ground, because it's been decades since I really tried to run. And now I would say if I had to, I think I can go run a marathon without any, well, it would take me a little while to recover from it maybe, but I can go do it without any problem.
Well, that's what's pretty cool about all the messaging you're putting out about this new goal, because I'm sure you have a lot of powerlifting followers, and I've engaged with a lot of endurance athletes over my time and realizing myself how important it is to broaden your horizons. Even if you love this sport the most and you'll always be at heart an ultra distance trail runner, now we're looking at the research and realizing that functional muscle strength is the number one predictor of longevity. It's not being able to go and shuffle through a marathon. And I think we get these narrow-minded, and I'm sure in the powerlifting community and in the gym community, they don't have enough respect for the ability to lace up your shoes and take off down the block. So we have a lot of fit specimens out there, but the focus is super narrow. And that includes, when I was a triathlete, it's all the same. It's just an extreme endurance, cardiovascular. All three sports are going straight ahead. You're not guarding anybody on the basketball court. And when I emerged from that period of my life, I realized how pathetic my overall fitness score was, and that I needed to broaden my horizons, which is, I think it's fun. You've showed, with your attitude and your lightheartedness about it. It's like, yeah, go run for 20 yards and celebrate these baby steps you're taking away from your bread and butter.
I think people would be shocked that it's like, it's impossible not to get better at something that you really suck at. When you're really bad at something,
the learning curve is faster. That's right.
It's really fast. You're going to be totally surprised. It's not going to be without like its bumps and bruises. It's not going to be without like, there's going to be pain. You are most likely going to hurt yourself. Like there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, even if you just tried to increase your push-ups, like, I don't know, you might hurt your wrist. You might hurt your shoulder. Like something's going to happen. It's a new stimulus. We talked this morning a little bit about new stuff. You always got to be cautious when something's new. So again, I think it's kind of a blessing to be older, to be like 40 plus, because you have learned at least some of the stuff that doesn't make sense for you to do at the moment, and that you're okay with like, I should probably build into that. But when you're still like in your 30s and stuff, you're like, yeah, I used to do that all the time. And then you tear your hamstring, you get hurt, you end up with, you got to find a way again to, mitigate what could potentially happen to you. Something like a hamstring tear or something like you don't want a hamstring tear, but we can be reasonable and understand that like we might get a hamstring tweak here and there, might get a calf tweak here and there, but we can't afford a tear. So you got to think about the stuff. You go with a friend and they're doing something extravagant, something a little different than what you're used to. Oh man, you got to be strong enough. And it's very difficult. You got to be strong enough to say, that's not for me. I went out with our buddy Graham Tuttle, the barefoot sprinter. And it was, I was all excited. I was like, I'm going to have him out here for a month. We're going to work together. All I'm going to do is like follow him through some drills. It's going to be awesome. And we did one workout where we did 100-meter. They weren't meant to be sprints of any kind. It was like 100-meter run. But this is also months ago, before I was as conditioned as I am now. And I should have known better. He said, we're going to do 8. I should have said, hey, you know what? 3 or 4 is probably going to be good for me. I'm a big boy and I'm out of shape, So we do 6, we do 7. And on the 8th one, I'm even trying to relax when I'm running and just got a little click. Something like the psoas or the hip, and it still bothers me. It still is a little, but I'm actually grateful for it because it's something that keeps me in check. And if that governor wasn't there, I probably would be and probably would have hurt myself way worse. So it's actually kind of it did throw me for a loop for a couple weeks. But these things, you're going to run into some setbacks, but I've always kind of viewed pain and injury as my mentor, my teacher. Is going to teach me some lessons, and how disrespectful of me to not learn the lessons. I need to pay attention. So that one I didn't really see, even though I probably, looking back at it, I probably should have. But I thought the intensity was low enough to not get hurt. And what I recognized is you can get hurt doing just about anything. So be really cautious. I've gotten hurt in the gym from pushing our sled at a really slow pace, just where I slightly popped something in my calf. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. What in the world was that? But I didn't warm up. There was like 5 plates on there. I just went right to it.
Yeah.
was too much of a strain at the wrong time of day or whatever it might be. I also got hurt a couple other times that were similar to that, where it wasn't like, okay, well, Mark tried to dunk a basketball and he tore his calf. It's like, well, that one I can take full blame and full responsibility.
A heroic effort.
And I can say that was really foolish. What was I doing? Trying to dunk with knees over toes guy. That was foolish, right? But a lot of times you just get hurt doing something that's kind of minimal. And how do we kind of, I kind of think of stuff as like Zombieland, the movie Zombieland, where he's got this list of things that can take him out in terms of the zombies getting him.
Yeah.
He always has his shoes tied, but not only are they tied, they're double loop, right? Double knotted. He does a bunch of other stuff, like he stretches, he does all this stuff. And I think you need the zombie land. He always has a baseball bat with him. Like he always has a weapon. I think you want to kind of zombie land your life against cancer, against heart disease, against diabetes. What are going to be the things that take you out? So what are these injuries that are going to happen? And how do we figure out a way? With our run today, we started out we didn't really pick up this pace much.
We started out slow and tapered off.
We kind of continued to go super slow. Yeah.
But that was an interesting
start low and slow.
We were talking about Kipchoge, the great marathoner who broke the world record last weekend. And they were,
is he under 2 hours?
He did the under 2 hours for that orchestrated sponsorship event where they ran around a racetrack with pacers and all these things that are illegal in real marathon racing. And some of the purists were like, well, that doesn't count because he had pacers and he had this and he had that and the lights lighting up to tell him what pace he was on and all these advantages. So he did a 1:59 marathon. I think it's a great athletic achievement. He still had to run it. Give me a break. But in like an official race, the Berlin Marathon, he did 2 hours and 1 minute. And so he's wow. It's just sensational.
But you said he trots, right? But
we were saying he starts his easy runs out at an 8:45 pace and then builds into finishing at a 6-something pace. And it's like, oh yeah, so do I, But if you think about 8 minutes 45, that's double his marathon pace. He's running 4:30 for the marathon. And so for almost all of us, to properly model the greatest runner in the world, most of our runs should be walks and jogs because he's running at 65% capacity for most of his weekly mileage. It's 100 out of his 135 miles a week are run at this pace that equates to a brisk walk for the average runner out there who's pretty competent and has put up some good times. It's kind of mind-blowing how the body builds from, sort of a natural and comfortable pace.
Yeah, what you mentioned to me.
There's a good treadmill. If you're watching on YouTube, they set up a treadmill to teach people what it's like to run his pace that he runs for a marathon. And they usually go for, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. It's 4 minutes, 32 per mile. It's insane.
And you were mentioning that he might be going 14, 15 miles an hour or something, right?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, he's running 4:32 per mile. Yeah, a 5-minute mile is 12 miles an hour.
That is, man, that is astonishing, the level that he's reached. But, it falls in line with some of the stuff that we've learned, or I've learned over the years from lifting. Some of the percentages and some of the things that we equate, some of the rest intervals, it's not uncommon for a rest interval with a sprint to be 16 times the amount of time it took you to do the sprint.
Yeah.
And you end up with similar, there's always that, everybody's experienced this. There's always that old fat guy at the gym who takes, 6-7 minutes in between his sets. Well, that's because the guy's doing, heavy singles. He's got to get his rest. And those lifts take a much shorter time. So the shorter that something is, the longer rest that you need to be able to duplicate it. And also the longer rest you need for the warm up. Our warm up today, we didn't have one. We just ran, right? Because we didn't move very fast. What we were doing wasn't really dynamic or spectacular. So, I know some people are you should always warm up. And, if I told you to, our workout for today is to open and close your fist as fast as you can for 100 reps on both hands, it's completely pointless to try to warm up for that. We're going to move our eyebrows as quick as we can, there's sometimes there's not a reason to warm up if what you're about to do is, you're basically just playing checkers or playing chess. I mean, there's not really maybe there is a warm up for chest. Sorry, everybody, but there doesn't always have
crossword puzzles or something.
Yeah,
Who
you
knows
might
what
need
they
to
do.
fire the brain a little bit, right? Take some modafinil or whatever it is, right? That they might take for that.
The chess players doping, yeah.
I know they are. That's what I heard.
Oh my gosh. I know the archers were getting in trouble for taking beta blockers, so they'd just be calmed down, and so that's on the banned list of substances. And
what do you think about trying to increase the intensity via some other things? So I know that some people sometimes they will increase their distance a little bit. So we just talked a little bit about like, hey, let's maybe peel back the running and maybe you'll run faster. That seems to be a good consensus right now, right? There's a lot of information. There has been information since the 80s, and the information is building and building. And it seems like, hey, Kipchoge's doing that, and so are a lot of other people. So that seems like a good route. Is there any other ways to maybe cheat the system, do you think? Like what if you ran with a weight vest that is 5% of your body weight or 10% of your body weight? Or what if we went and did some hills, but we ran real slow? Like, what's your opinion on some of that?
Altitude training is the best example because everything's way more difficult up there. So with running and with any impact sport, there's a huge limiting factor here, which is the stress to the body. And so you can't just go out there and run as fast as you can every day and expect to get better. They did that, interestingly, in the old days, in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And Paavo Nurmi, this great Finnish runner who won many gold medals, they reported his workouts and they were just torturous. But he survived and was able to win Olympic gold medals.
And
but
the first guy that beat the 4-minute mile, he also
Bannister was a
ran
medical
like a
student,
madman, right?
Yeah, and he had 30 minutes a day to train, and he broke the world record in his time and ran 3:59 in the mile. So he was running hard every time he went out to the track. And now the more sophisticated approach is to kind of build this aerobic conditioning base at a comfortable pace so it's not stressful to the body. And so there are ways to kind of get around this limiting factor of the impact trauma of running. And that would be non-weight bearing activities like sprinting on the bicycle or going uphill, going to altitude.
What if you went the opposite direction?
You would probably have that tweak in the psoas times 20. Like,
you think so? I mean, sometimes that's the answer, right? Like, so I said a 5 pound or 10 pound, but like, what if you went with like or 5% or 10%? What if you went with something that's like 30% your body weight, 50% your body weight?
It would be interesting because you wouldn't be able to move as quickly. And so you would have less impact trauma carrying extra weight in that example. And it could have a certain training benefit. But the interesting thing is, and we talked about the Inga Britsons on your show, where these guys knew that anything short of actually running in a circle around the track at race pace was less effective. You just can't do that all the time. And so they'd go in the pool and they'd be grumbling and frustrated about it if they had an injury because they knew they were falling off conditioning. But in a
they
big
like
picture,
to be very specific, those guys.
Well, you have to. I mean, it's like Kipchoge can't run a 2:01 marathon dawdling in the park and riding his bicycle in the mountains. But that can be complementary to the workouts that you can do. Same with, for example, a CrossFit person, maybe just doing a hike on the weekend to build their endurance because they're working out for a long time in the gym, and endurance is an important component there.
I see. So like maybe a hike or maybe a ruck, something like that might be beneficial because it's not running, but yes, you maybe have more weight or you do have a lot of hills. What about running hills? Do you know anything about, like, does that pull some of the, like, is there, I mean, I guess there'd be like more kind of tension on your hamstrings and stuff, but like, because each step is upward rather than straight forward, there's got to be less impact.
Oh, massively less impact. Yeah. Same with doing all the drills that I do. And I did some this morning and they're on YouTube. And those are of minimal impact because you're just not, turning on the gas and running as fast as you can. So we always have to work around that challenge of staying healthy. That's a tough one. Running uphill is great. Yeah.
So it's almost like maybe a little bit of the conjugate system into some running, like Louis Simmons in powerlifting was a huge fan of the conjugate system, which just basically meant you had a large variety of exercise to rotate around.
Oh, so that you wouldn't like over traumatize some joint from doing too much bench press.
So maybe like one day we go and we smash some hills. Maybe the next day we do a really light run. Maybe the next day we do the Aerodyne bike, things like that, right?
Okay. So here's what the triathletes learned the hard way. Is it was such a wonderful awakening for me as an injured college runner. Again and again and again, I finally threw up my arms and said, this ain't working for me. I cannot handle the collegiate running system. And so I went right over to triathlon. I was never injured again for a decade because if I got a niggle in my deltoid from swimming, I wouldn't swim for a few days. I'd go and bike 100 miles and pretty soon the shoulder would right itself. And same with any minor running injury. You just take care of it by sitting on the bike seat and going to the swimming pool. However, the human, is this dynamic organism that only has a certain amount of energy to devote to locomotion, like that quote from Dr. Herman Ponzer. Reproduction, repair, growth, and locomotion are a zero-sum game. So if you're locomoting your ass off like a Tour de France rider, riding for hours and hours every day, they're lying on their back and eating food when they're not pedaling because they have no more energy to devote. And I'm sure that you run up against that limit in powerlifting as well.
Yeah, the wife's like, hey, what's going on here?
Yeah, you can't get off the couch.
Right.
But I mean, would a power lifter benefit from some explosive basketball training with the basketball team? Perhaps so. But if you don't have the energy or you're bumping up against your maximum energy capability, then you're not going to benefit from anything except a meditation session.
Yeah. And where the power lifter would benefit the most from basketball is if he had it in his history.
So it wasn't as stressful.
Yeah, that's where you would want the non-specific stuff most likely to be. Otherwise, it has to be like kind of specific. You know what I mean? Like, even though Louis Simmons did switch up exercises, it wasn't like he went from a close grip bench press to playing tennis. He went from a close grip bench press to a wide grip bench press, right?
Yeah. I think if you're doing it right, like the elite athletes of the world are good models because obviously they're doing something right. And Michael Phelps, we talked about him a bit. He trained 5 hours a day for 20 years straight or something. He didn't
5
miss
years.
a day.
Yeah, 5 years in a row.
5 years he had a streak. But generally in his career, he was in the water for a large part of his day because there's no stress to the joints and the musculoskeletal. And so swimmers can train in a manner of speaking, as hard as any athlete or harder than any other athlete in terms of their lungs working and their muscles moving because they're weightless. I wouldn't say it's as hard as, the hardest training athletes are probably someone that's taking impact and working all their muscles like a runner. A cross-country skier is another good example of, they're just working the muscles and the cardiovascular system like crazy because there's no impact there. So every athlete has their limitations, and some of it's the impact.
I'm really excited about this book that we're formulating and working on because, have so many people asking questions about diet and nutrition. And sometimes the answer is kind of obvious and sometimes it's like not so obvious. And you get into a lot of stuff about keto and intermittent fasting, and it can be complicated. But a lot of things are like an overcorrection, right? So we had like this carb thing going on for a long time. And people really watch their fat calories, which still, by the way, I don't think is a necessarily bad idea. I do think it's a bad idea to limit your fat to the point where it's detrimental to your hormones. But most people, if they have, even just throwing out a blanket number, regardless of size or sex, if people have 60 to 70 grams of fat in a day, they're usually good to go. Like there's not a lot of people that would suffer from anything eating that amount of fat. That would be a reasonable amount. But there was people years ago like trying to have zero fat each day, and they were eating like 500 or 600 grams of carbohydrates. But there's a lot of stuff to kind of untangle and stuff like that. And I think people need to try to find, when somebody says, you need to find something that works for you, I think we need to kind of define that because there is a clear pathway for the human body, and there's a clear pathway that the human body works. Like we know that if you prioritize protein, that'll do some really magnificent things for you. And if you're somebody that has struggled with hunger in the past, eating a lot of protein will really knock the crap out of some hunger. It won't really help with the cravings. On the other hand, what can help with the cravings, though, is some sweet something or other. So I love protein shakes. I love fruit, protein shakes, fruit. I also eat some cottage cheese, eat some yogurt. I buy yogurt that doesn't have sugar in it. And then I take a scoop of my vanilla protein and I throw it in the plain yogurt and I mix it up and it tastes unbelievable. And that's part of my fruit bowl. But what I think is an interesting thing, I think sometimes when people start to think about their diet, they think of this really dry, boring thing. Man, how many days can I make it through this? How many? Oh shit, look at that, man. It's day 3 and I'm still doing pretty good, but I don't feel great. Like I'm tired. It's because people are underfed. We lost sight of the fact that your nutrition needs to be very nutritious. And you can accomplish this by eating what I'm a huge fan of is meat and fruit. You might be able to mix some other stuff in there too. And definitely there's room for play. Like, let's not make any mistake about that as well. Again, if we don't put like a time domain on this, if we're not in like a race to lose 30 pounds by the end of the month or in 2 months, is there room for a beer? Is there room for some wine? Is there room to go to a baseball game and have a hot dog? I think there should be. I think if those are things that you value and you enjoy and you like, especially sometimes with family, I love having a drink with my wife. I like that today that you mentioned Mark Sisson. Like, you're like, yeah, it's pretty cool, man, because he is a hard ass. He's got a lot of things lined up really well. He is a really powerful man. However, he doesn't mind just enjoying some food here and there, enjoying a drink here and there. I think most people, I think that's what they're after. They're trying to find that. How do I find that equanimity in my diet? How do I find that kind of balance in my diet? And what I would say is, like, part of the unfortunate thing with a nutritional intervention is that it's never over. Like, there's not an end to it. There's not an end to it. There's no end game. There's no like, all right, I got to 12% body fat and I'm a little bit more jacked and now I get to just chill. Like, it doesn't work that way. Your body fat percentage is going to quickly start to go back up again. Now, your metabolism is a little faster and you might process the calories and utilize the energy more efficiently and stuff like that. Sure. But your luck's going to run out at a certain point if you mess around for too long. So what I'm excited about is, I think what some of the stuff that we've been writing about so far is getting rid of is that we are going to provide you with a diet where, yes, there's still maybe cravings towards some old things that you really enjoyed, like candy and pizza and ice cream. Like, we can't outline a diet that allows for that to frequently be eaten. However, when you have a combination of meat and fruit and some dairy, some protein shakes here and there, you're going to feel like you're on a diet that doesn't need any cheat meals. You're going to feel like you're on a diet that doesn't need a cheat day. And again, occasionally you're going to be like, oh, it's my wedding anniversary. Fucking celebrate 10 years. It's going to be great. Go have some wine. Go enjoy a meal of whatever it is your favorite thing is. But the real bitch of it is, once you get deep into this and you learn it, that meal is probably going to be like steak and potatoes.
Right.
It's not going to be like a bunch of donuts or something like you're envisioning in your head.
Yeah, I think those cravings for processed foods are on account of having processed foods present in the diet for years and decades. And these mess up your ability to generate cellular energy internally. Therefore, if you're not feeling energetic and alert and in a good positive mood with your appetite hormones and everything stable, you're going to be looking around, and everyone can relate to this at the end of a tired, cranky, stressful day. That's when you're going to reach for the Ben & Jerry's pint. But if you like front load with, impeccable nutritional standards, you're going to drift in the direction of the stuff that you want more than anything else is 10 eggs every morning. Like Andrew.
We heard about a savage guy who does 10 eggs. And didn't we hear about that? Is that a rumor?
And you look forward to it every morning, right?
Every single morning. Yeah.
It's fantastic strategy. I mean, it could be another book there The 10 egg diet, how to lose weight and get shredded in a short time. Just start with 10 eggs.
I think we could write the entire outline and click publish probably by the end of today, because you just eat 10 eggs every day and then you're good to go. Yeah.
What I like about that is, hey, you know what? We've heard from a lot of people that struggle with their diet, and what is the major problem? A lot of times they look at their plate and there's not much food there, you know? And another problem that we have is like, that food doesn't taste very good. I don't want to eat that salad. I don't want to eat whatever the food is that they don't like. 10 eggs with some butter. And I think Andrew even has some toast with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I guess, the one thing that's subprimal is that I will have like just your regular ass bread that I toast.
You're on the JV team, bro.
Yeah. I know. Right. Yeah. I'm still riding the pine, but yeah, I have that because 10 eggs, like it will get kind of like a daunting task, because you look at this gigantic plate and it's like, oh my gosh. But then you have that toast and you're like, oh, like now it's a party, you know, and it's delicious.
No, I love that. And again, you know, hearing some of the issues that people have had, you know, I used to weigh 330 pounds myself, and I had a lot of issues. I thought, you know, I just got big for powerlifting, and this is, you know, time to get shredded. And I went to go on a diet, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I got a problem. Like, this is not good. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. I still wake up in the middle of the night. I still want to eat. And I still do eat. A lot of times I'll make like a protein shake. Every once in a while I'll have a malfunction and eat something that I probably shouldn't. But it's usually pretty clean, even if I do. But I wake up often. I don't know why I do this. I do this every day. And you know, like sometimes you do something every day and you're like, why do I do this every day? And I tell myself every day that I'm not going to do this, and then I end up doing it again. This is the thing for me is, I mean, now you see me pounding, like I just had 4 drinks, right? I don't normally drink enough during the day. So I'm trying to like start a new habit of drinking more during the day, because I drink so much at night, and then I'm Mr. Pee-Pee Pants at night, and I have to use the bathroom a bunch. But sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm kind of like up. So I'm like, I'm going to go make a protein shake or something like that. I got a sweet tooth.
Try some new flavors here.
Yeah. I got a sweet tooth from even back, you know, now it's been like 10 years ago since I slayed that dragon that was 330 pounds. And the dragon is still hungry. It's still got to feed it here and there. So,
I'd say you did a number on yourself from that quest to add weight. And I feel I can relate a little bit, because the triathlete example is we literally had to make a concerted effort to consume extra calories so we would recover. And so you get in this mindset of just like inhaling food and then reaching for more and wandering around and having food in your hand and having snacks in your drawer and your bag. And
couldn't leave the house without a big thing of food.
Yeah. And then you're asking me to extricate from that immediately the day that I retire and stop training for 5 or 6 hours a day. It messes with your head. It really does. The relationship with food is not appropriate, because it should be a celebratory event every time we eat. The mealtime should be calm, relaxing, a great time to share and socialize, a home-cooked, home-prepared meal. And when you're in like the calorie mode, you have to discard all that and say, you know, give me something right now. I'm going to get moody in 15 minutes. So when you're going for that competitive powerlifting, and you said just put on weight is a good way to get stronger, I'm wondering why that would matter if it was fat. Like, if you're going to go to the deadlift bar at 330 pounds, but you're 20% fat, are you going to lift less weight now that you're jacked and tan? Is that what you're telling me?
If you were to take a pillow and just put it under your shirt and then bend down like you're about to pick up a deadlift bar, you'll immediately feel a little more pressure. So having a little bit of a belly, you know, and some of those guys kind of have, which is probably not the healthiest thing, they kind of have a belly that's kind of like a hard abdomen / you know, oblique kind of boulder looking stomach, right? When you go to deadlift and you go to pick up that weight, it is a big advantage. In the deadlift in particular, sometimes it's a disadvantage. Sometimes you'll actually notice a lot of deadlifters have sometimes a smaller waist, but usually like just, you know, mass moves mass. And so when we're talking about like football player, you know, a center versus like a nose guard in football or something like that, I mean, the guy across the ball doesn't care if the other guy's ripped. You know, the fact the guy's 325 is what allows him to like handle himself. So it's not the end all be all to be big, to be able to lift heavy, and you certainly don't need to be big to lift heavier weights. However, it's normally advantageous to be a little bigger because it normally gives you a mechanical advantage.
I wonder if also you're making sure you're recovered. You're not screwing around with fasting. And hey, maybe you're gaining, 50 pounds over your 10-year career, whatever it is, but you're well fed all the time. That's kind of a good way to train for powerlifting.
I'm also talking about so there's that kind of weight gain where you're like bulking and you're getting big. You don't necessarily have to push to that level, but for some people listening, they might not be able to relate. They might not have felt this before. But when you feel well fed, like you ate a good amount of food in the course of a handful of days and you're well trained, you could feel it in your inside your muscles that you feel strong. Like right now, my muscles feel hydrated. I drank a lot of water. I had some fruit this morning. I had some meat this morning. We went on that run. So everything's working and my body is using energy the way it's supposed to, but it's also sticking energy into the right spots, I believe. And so if I was to go bench press right now, I would feel pretty strong, as opposed to even if I was we know what dehydration can do. We know how that can weaken you so much. But if I was 3 pounds lighter, just simply because I didn't eat today, because it's just math, right? There's each one of these things weighs something, and I ate food. So 3-4 pounds of weight, if I was 3 or 4 pounds lighter and some of these fluids didn't have an opportunity to start to get into my muscles, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily automatically be weaker, but I certainly wouldn't feel as strong. It's you need that kind of cellular buildup. And if somebody can picture if you're to put on an elbow sleeve or a knee sleeve, it instantly will make your arm bigger because you're now a 1/4 inch bigger on the forearm, a 1/4 inch bigger on the bicep. And when you go to lower your forearm onto your bicep in something like a bench press, it happens earlier.
So this is the secret behind the slingshot. This is why you became the meathead millionaire.
That's right. Yeah.
So explain this again. You put on a contraption. I guess a belt would count too, or anything.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So any type of device that is what's
supportive.
It doing? It's supportive and it's confining the muscle and causing more compression or something.
A compressed muscle, a lot of times, is a stronger muscle. A larger muscle is oftentimes a stronger muscle. And again, that has to do with leverages. Yeah. A lot of times.
I thought it was just a gimmick this whole time, this slingshot thing. It looks cool.
Turns out the damn thing might do something, right?
So you can lift more weight when you slingshot up also. And you're safer.
Right.
Because why?
What I believe the slingshot actually does, there's some different things to elbow sleeves and knee sleeves, but the slingshot in particular, I believe it acts as double muscle. So it's almost a way to make yourself bigger for a minute, even though it's not doing anything in that regard, but it acts as double muscle. So when you go to lower a weight in something like a bench press, that is the eccentric portion of the bench press. That's the lowering portion of the bench press. The eccentric portion of a bench press is when the chest muscles start to stretch and lengthen. The same exact thing is happening with the slingshot. That's why I refer to it as double muscle. It is stretching and lengthening as you bring the weight down.
There's a video of the slingshot, so you're going to have to watch the video. There's Mark explaining the slingshot.
As you go to press the weight back up, your muscles are going to contract. They're going to shorten, and so will the slingshot around your body. So even though it helps and even though it assists, there's still a lot of work that you have to do to press the weight just to press the weight through full range of motion. And so you're not only getting the benefit of the slingshot giving you some protection, but you're also still getting an awesome benefit of of just bench pressing in general. One of the things that happens, and Joel Seedman does a lot of work in this area. He's one of the few guys where you really talk about this a lot, but Joel Seedman is a huge fan of what most of us would call half reps. He likes to see people. He doesn't believe that sports are played down low. Which is kind of uncommon. Most people are you got to be a little low for these sports. He trains a lot of professional athletes, and he has his athletes train in a lot higher ranges. So with someone like you who wants to get better at high jump, you would say, man, yeah, it's hard for me to squat, man. It just kills my back. So then you would show him your squat and he would be like, dude, you're going way too low. And you would be happy with that because he'd be like, okay, let's.
Well, the jump is only using 20-degree bend in the leg or somewhere around there. So why am I going all the way ass to grass? I like his stuff. It's very controversial, I guess, where you're only going to 90 degrees on all these things. And then Ben Patrick's having you go pretzel style, bend over backward, reverse Nordics, all that great stuff.
Yeah, I see value in both.
Yeah, me too.
And
good one. Yeah.
Yeah, they're both phenomenal people. And they're not at ends with each other. They actually agree on a lot of stuff too. But what I would say is like some of the stuff from Ben Patrick, getting down in those deep squat positions with minimal weight or no weight, that's a fantastic idea. That's just a different style of squatting though. That's like, you get a 20-pound dumbbell or you get some kettlebells, and every once in a while, maybe you want to test yourself and handle something a little heavier. But I really think that what Joel does with the partial range of motion and the overload is really important. And it plays into why I created the slingshot and why the slingshot's so effective and why there's been over 1 million slingshots sold. Is because when people,
there's 1 million people walking around with slingshots
all over the goddamn place. I mean, worldwide.
I didn't even know that many people going to the gym and lifting.
I didn't even know there was that many people on the planet.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's fantastic, man. Fist bump for the fans watching. And we got to get into that too. So you were watching your dad do the books, and that was alluding to how you became a competitive power lifter. Thanks to the brothers, thanks to the environment. But then this business aspect too is pretty interesting. So I guess at some point you reached the very highest level in powerlifting. So you were a really focused pro athlete at 330, and then take us down the road to like becoming the entrepreneur. And then while you're at it, how you got that weight off and went from fat powerlifter to jacked and tan.
Yeah, I tore my pec several times, and
oh boy.
That's, when you get backed into a corner, that's when, some innovation can start happening, or you just crumple up and die, right? So I had to really kind of think about this a little bit more, and I tore my pec pretty severely getting ready for a contest. I was deadlifting really well and squatting really well. Things were just starting to click. I was just coming into my own. I was just starting to, at that time, I think I squatted around 900 in the gym, and I started benching like around 700. Like the lifts were just starting to click. And every week or every 2-3 weeks, it was like, oh man, I could do way more than that. When I did the 905 squat in the gym, I remember it was actually like, it was pretty easy, and I was kind of surprised. I was like, man, that moved really quick. I think I can kind of continue to ratchet up and continue to be more successful. So I was just on fire, but I got hurt. And then going into this competition, I was like, you know what? I'm doing too well in the squat and the deadlift to just pop out of the meet because my bench isn't very good. So I'm going to still compete. So I basically, getting ready for this competition, I wore, back then I competed in powerlifting gear, squat suits, bench shirts, things like that. They are kind of restrictive devices that allow you to lift more weight. So in training, I noticed that I could put on a really baggy, loose bench shirt and I could lift and I didn't have any pain. And I was like, okay, I think maybe I can still go to this competition and still end up with a good squat, still end up with a good deadlift. And I didn't want to lose that momentum on those lifts. So I knew the bench was just going to be like a throwaway. Like it wasn't going to be a good bench. So I knew that was going to be the case. So I went and I competed. I did well like I thought I was going to do in the squat. I did well like I thought I was going to do in the deadlift. And I did okay on the bench. I got away with like nothing hurting. So I was like, that's a victory. But when the contest was over, check this out. This is a 900 something pound board press and a bench shirt. Look at that weight on there.
We're watching a guy bench a lot of weight, people. The bar is bending like a pretzel. Amazing what people can do.
Some wild stuff, face turning purple and everything.
Big time.
So as I was, I was able to do the contest. I was able to be pretty successful. But afterwards, I was thinking, I know so many guys that told me over the years, And they were really heartbroken over it. They're like, man, I used to bench all the time. I love it. Like people love the exercise. People love to bench press, especially men. Men love to bench press. Anytime anybody mentions anything about working out, people are like, how much you bench? Right away. It's the first question. And I was always like bummed out by the fact that people said they used to bench press. And I'm like, man, that sucks. Why can't they do it anymore? And I didn't understand because I didn't have any injuries at the time. But as I started to have these injuries happening through powerlifting, I started to think, man, I don't want to become like that. I want to always be able to do this. I want to be able to have access to this all the time. So when that contest was over, I went to the gym. I just sat there at the end of the bench and I was just like looking at the bench and I had this baggy bench shirt thing on. I'm like, I got to figure something. There's got to be something. Bench shirts are weird. They're expensive. They kind of, they're
hard to get on. They're hard to get off.
They're really hard to get on and off. You need like multiple people helping you. You need people to, it's really funny. It's like a straitjacket. You need people to like lift the weight out to you because you can't like move your arms that well. You become like a mummy. Like you're really like stuck in this position. And so I was like, I think I can make something different that's stretchy that allows a full range of motion. Because one of the problems with the bench press, back to Joel Seidman, is that when you start to break 90, as you're coming down the bench press, you end up with a huge mechanical disadvantage. And that's usually where people get hurt in the bench press. It's the least advantageous position to have both the elbows pinned back behind the body. And if you're trying to just to think, I don't always like to push everything back to evolutionary stuff, but it makes a lot of sense. You know, you don't throw with both arms. You know, you don't like throw a spear with both arms. You don't throw a baseball with, you don't throw stuff with both arms. You don't punch with both arms. Like you don't ever do that motion, right? It's one side at a time. If you're going to punch or throw, and the hips are involved and the torso and everything. So a bench press is a really weird movement and probably kind of a foolish one, but it is what it is. It's something that people really like to do and enjoy. So I created this device that goes over your elbows, stretches across your chest, and as you go to get into the least advantageous position of the bench press, which is at the bottom, you get the most amount of support. As you go to push through the lift, and as you get into more favorable positions for your shoulders, your triceps, and your pecs, the slingshot lets off.
Unlike the constricting garment, which is just tight all the time.
It's just tight all the time, and it's like really difficult to get the weight to come down all the way. Like it's just a nightmare. It just doesn't work well. A lot of times you need like 110 or 120% of your max. You know, so if you bench 300 pounds, you might immediately need like 330 or 350 just to be able to get the weight all the way down to touch in a bench shirt. The slingshot doesn't work that way. You could put 45 on each side and you can bring the weight all the way down. So it allows you to work in a full range of motion fairly easy. So yeah,
it's like sleeves that you, if you're not watching, it's sleeves that you try on like a shirt and then a strap across your chest. So it's like a miniature straight jacket or something.
Yep. We make different versions of it too. We make a slingshot push-up as well. And there's different strengths, but the slingshot push-up is something like and I've done this before. I've gone on a run. I'll pull it up on one elbow and I'll do my run. And in between, I'll drop down and do push-ups. You know, things like that. I mean, why not switch up your workouts here and there? It's real easy, lightweight, convenient to carry around, stick it in your gym bag. But there are a lot of people that love the bench press and they're trying to stay healthy on it. Yeah. So that can help with that. It's also good for dips. But there are a lot of people that really struggle with their push-ups. And we've had a lot of women give us really good feedback to the point where they're like, I couldn't do any push-ups. Now I'm utilizing the slingshot push-up. And they're starting to make a lot of progress. They'll go from only being able to do 1 or 2 push-ups in the slingshot push-up to being able to do 10, to being able to do 20. And then when they get out of the slingshot, they're able to still do reps because they taught their body how to do it. Usually the biggest problem for people when it comes to push-ups is they don't have the strength in their shoulders and the strength in their core. It's not connected. You know how like we talk about doing an upper body workout and a lower body workout. Like we talk about the body as if it's this disconnected thing. Yeah. Well, the body
Today I'm doing legs only. Yeah.
The body can be a little screwed up over time, and it can feel disconnected. And for most people, when they go to try to have an expression through their upper body, their lower body sometimes isn't on board with it. And so if you utilize a slingshot for push-ups, you'll start to feel everything integrated all at once. You'll feel your whole core involved, your toes, your ankles, your calves, your quads, everything. Because now you're also in a push-up position for a longer period of time. So if you went from, let's say you can only do one, let's say you can do 2 reps in a push-up. It's like, how long?
It's going to be hard to get fit.
Yeah.
Take a while.
Yeah. You're only going to be in a push-up position for 10, 15 seconds. What if you can start to do 10 or 20? Like if you start doing maybe 20 push-ups, you'll probably be in a push-up position for 30 or 40 seconds. That is a huge difference in volume.
So you came up with this idea when you're sitting on the bench one day in your baggy shirt, and then an aunt or someone sewed the first one, or was this little the prototype just came up in your mind, and then you got some elastic and got it working?
Yeah, I had the idea for a long time, and I didn't really know what to do with it.
Just cooking in your head, you mean?
It's cooking in my head.
No prototype. You just had an idea. You just had a secret idea. He's pacing around the halls.
It was just sitting in my...
What's wrong, Mark? No, nothing. What are you thinking about? Oh, nothing. Yeah.
It was sitting in my head, and I just didn't know what to do about it. And so I was I think this is pretty common. I think people are, and this is why I encourage people so much to go out and like do stuff and like try to make stuff happen, because this almost didn't happen, because I just sat there with the idea for a while. I mean, for a few years, it was just like dormant, because I was like waiting around. I'm like, oh, someone will come around. Like I thought someone would like do it for me, kind of thing. I had good relationships in powerlifting. I knew some people that had that made powerlifting equipment. I went to some of them. They weren't interested. Most of them thought it was a dumb idea. And I had enough people around me that thought it was a dumb idea, to the point where I was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe that is kind of a dumb idea. And then my oldest brother, Mike, when he died, that just changed everything. I was like, if you watch the movie Bigger, Stronger, Faster, he says in the movie, he's like, I had something in my heart that I knew I wanted to share with the world, but I kind of don't know what it is. I was like, well, whatever that feeling is, I don't want to have that. I would like to be able to express myself and get my ideas out there, and the inventions and the songs that I have, I'm going to go sing them, So I took the slingshot to a bunch of different people. I couldn't figure out how to get it made. And I'm like, just super frustrated, driving home in my shitty Honda Odyssey minivan, that the blinker would come on every once in a while. The horn would honk every once in a while, because I was mad one day and I punched it, and it would just go, brum, 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 and I'd always look behind me as if somebody else was honking the horn. I was just driving home and kind of like almost near tears, just being frustrated with myself, because I wasn't really making any money. I was powerlifting, and I was a savage and doing good stuff in that, and had the gym and stuff already, but just wasn't doing much of anything from a financial standpoint. And so I had this idea in my head. I'm like, I don't know, there's something there with the idea. And I'm thinking like, can my brother help me? Can my wife help me? And I just started kind of thinking about all the people that I know. I started thinking about all the people that are like in my Rolodex or in my phone. I'm thinking about all the contacts I have with people. And it starts to kind of come to me. I'm like, okay, just calm down a bit and just think about it a little bit more logically. Like, does anybody know anything about like fabric or materials or anything like that? And so I'm just thinking, well, you got like, because I was a tinkerer. I tried and you probably did this with your triathlons. You probably tried every shoe, every compression sock, every pair of shorts, anything that you thought would like rocket you forward a little faster. You probably tried all of it 1,000 times over, and probably had a storage bin's worth of crap that like some of it worked, some of it didn't. So I had tons and tons of knee wraps everywhere. And I was like, I have material already. So I just need to take that material to somebody that can sew it in the configuration that I have in my head. And I actually wrote on a piece of paper because I can't, well, I don't possess the ability to draw very well. So I drew like this figure 8, like almost like an infinity sign.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I think it'll be like that. It'll be like this twisted, like knee wrap thing. And so I thought about it, and I came up with my wife's friend sews the swimsuits for my wife's swim team. And I was like, oh, maybe she would be able to do it. I asked a couple other people, but they were like, I don't have a machine like that can sew, you can't do it by hand, you need like a machine. So
getting some dead ends here, man.
Yeah. So,
and all the people that thought it was a dumb idea. I love that. Maybe they could sign a poster for you.
Yeah.
1 million sold.
Right. And so, yeah, I went to my wife's friend, and she turns out she could do it. She did have the right machine. And so I met her at Starbucks in Woodland, California, with a bag full of knee wraps, and said, hey, can you sew this kind of like this? She's like, if I sew it like that, I don't know. And I said, oh, well, how about this? And so I folded it over, and we pinned it, a certain way. She goes, oh, yeah, that'll work. And that's kind of the way the slingshot looks now. And so she came back a week later, met me at that Starbucks again. Right next to that Starbucks, at the time, there was a Fitness 19 right there. And so she shows me this product, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, my God, this looks cool. I put it on. It kind of fits. I'm like, can you stay right there? I'm like, I'm going to go try this on. So I go and walk because I wasn't about to run anywhere at that size. I walk to the Fitness 19 and, just walk in like I own the place. That's the way you always walk into a gym. It's the surest way to get past the guy at the front desk.
Nice friendly nod.
Give him the wave and be like, yep, Bob told me to come here. Yep, see you later. So I hop on the bench and I put 135 on and move it around a little bit. Feels amazing in the slingshot. And I knew that wasn't like a good tester. So I put 2 plates on and move that around. Feels almost completely weightless at the bottom, but there's some weight at the top. I rack the weight, get up off the bench, and I just head to toe goosebumps.
Wow.
I'm like, this is it. Like, holy shit. This is like a lottery ticket. And I don't know why I felt this way because no one sold anything like that ever before. Right. So I don't know why I was so entranced with my own idea, but I thought I had something special. And so I went back to my wife's friend and said, hey, I need to make a couple of these. I need to make sure.
A couple thousand.
Well, I need to make a couple of them just to test them in the gym because I need to make sure like that these things don't break and fall apart and stuff. And so it was a matter of kind of finding the right material to sew into the slingshots. But we already had that information because we were already bench pressing in bench shirts. And so we knew we needed certain types of nylons that were really strong that were sewn into the bench shirts that wouldn't rip or tear. They just had really good like tensile strength. So I gave her some instruction on that. And from that point, it was just a matter of finding like a manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And that was as simple as, hanging out at that same Starbucks with my iPhone and iPad and typing in on the internet, using Google, knee wrap manufacturers. And the first thing that popped up is a company that we used that didn't work out great. Because those slingshots, I wanted the slingshot to be red. Most powerlifters, they all wear black. Bigger guys trying to hide the fact that they got a little extra meat on their bones. Wear the darker colors because they're slimming. So I wanted to make the slingshot bright so that way people saw it if somebody was wearing it in the gym. And the first batch of slingshots turned everyone's skin red because the thing was like, the dye was like falling off of there. My wife and I tried to run it through our washer, and it broke our washer.
Wow.
And then they smelled weird, and it was just kind of a nightmare. So that didn't work well. But that was only like at the time, it was expensive for us, but it was a $700 investment. Mm-hmm. That was just a loss. But, every little bit of money you got when you don't have any is a lot. And then so the next thing I did was to find another manufacturer, one that doesn't have the red, seeping out onto everybody's body, making it look like they're bleeding when they're lifting. And I I had kind of a misunderstanding with the manufacturer in terms of like when I had to pay. And I thought I was able to give them half the money up front and then they would ship it. I think I ordered 20,000 slingshots, and looking back at it, that was like, just didn't make any sense. But again, I was so confident that they were going to sell like crazy. I was like, oh, I'll be able to sell these really easy in like a year. So anyway, I had a misunderstanding on the finances of it. And they were like, no, like we need the money, we need the rest of the money, and then we ship it to you. And I was like, oh shit. So I had to sit on that for a minute and kind of think about it. I'm like, where can I pull out? And I think it was like 10 grand or something I needed, or maybe 5 grand. I didn't have much money. So I just thought of one of my friends, and his name is John Hennigan. He's a former, well, I think he still wrestles. He used to be a WWE guy, professional wrestler. And at the time he was doing really well. And I called him up and we started talking, and he's like, what's going on? I said, hey, you know that slingshot thing I was telling you about when we used to wrestle? I used to do pro wrestling. I lived in Kentucky for a little while, and he and I got to be friends. And he goes, yeah, I do remember you mentioning that, because he was big into fitness too. I said, well, I'm trying to make it. I'm trying to make the product. He's like, holy shit. He's like, that's amazing. And he's like, just right away, he's like, how can I help? Like he kind of knew, I was probably calling in a favor. And I was like, I kind of need money. He's like, you kind of need money, or you need money? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I need money to get these made. I have everything all situated and they're ready to ship. I just, could use a boost, And he was just like, yeah, man, what's your address? It'd be out your front door tomorrow. I'll send it.
Wow.
I'll send it overnight or whatever. And so, yeah, pulled out a check from him for whatever it was, $5K, $10K. I mean, I think we all need help in this world. We all need an angel, in our corner here and there. And so that person for me, obviously my parents with all their support all the time over the years, mentally and whatever other way they could support. But that was a huge, huge deal from a friend, and kind of got me out of a jam. When I got the products, I called him and I was like, yeah, I'm going to pay you back, just probably take, 6 months and he was just so kind and so gracious. And he was like, dude, don't worry about it. He's like, I don't want to be negative, but he's like, you're not going to be able to pay me back in 6 months. Like it's going to, it's a new company. He's like, it's a new business. It's going to take you some time. And I was like, all right, cool. So I think I paid him back like 2 years later, but those 20,000 slingshots, they did sell the way that I thought. They sold, it took me 14 months to get rid of them and not 12 months. And I kind of miscalculated some sizes. So I had some slingshots that were smaller than I anticipated, and they didn't fit anybody. Like they wouldn't fit like a baby.
Some kid.
Yeah. So those, there was, 150 of them or 200 of them that just never sold.
Donate them to the kindergarten, the local elementary. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For the kids that want to have huge bench presses.
Now, how did you sell them? You didn't have a platform. You just popped up a website and started selling, or did you go around to retail or to the powerlifting meets out of your trunk, or what?
I had a platform. Yeah, there was a thing called YouTube that was just circulating around, and I happened to be on the front end of that. YouTube came out in 2006. I have been on the internet to some capacity via videos and other things probably since 2002 or 3. Or maybe 4. I don't remember the dates really. Kind of hard for me to think back. But I did a lot of stuff for Dave Tate with EliteFTS.com. You can still look up the log that I have in there under the name Jackass. And, it's just like a training log of the way that I was lifting when I was doing pro wrestling and powerlifting and mixing the combination of those two things together. So I had a little bit of a name for myself already, doing some stuff with him and for him. And then when I started getting more and more, when I started getting deeper into powerlifting, I just kind of recognized what a weird, I'm in a weird world. You sometimes are telling me about some of these guys you trained with, and they're like legendary people. You're like, oh, this guy and this guy. Yeah, he won, he won the Ironman in 1999, and this guy, and it's like, holy shit, like these are, you're not just like out on a little run or a little, trip on your bike. You're like actually with some of the best in the world. And I wasn't necessarily with the best in the world, but I did recognize how weird and uncommon the things that we were doing were. Having a woman in our gym squat, 650 pounds, and just kind of seeing these things and being like, I should record this stuff. Like somebody's going to care about this. I always thought it was cool. So I'm like, I'm going to film this a lot. And what we did, I filmed a lot of stuff myself, edited a lot of stuff myself. We also had another guy that was with us at the time. His name's Jim McD. And you could still look up some of the stuff on that YouTube channel, Jim McD 1234. I got tons of stuff on Super Training Gym. I think it's Super Training Gym YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, it's Mark Bell's Super Training Gym.
Mark Bell's Super Training Gym YouTube channel. But there's like endless amounts of videos. I mean, I think I'm one of the first guys to do voiceover stuff, which sounds so strange. But I just didn't see it from anybody else, but I wanted to bring that to people because I wanted to educate them as well as showcase, hey, look at this guy squatting 600 pounds, or this girl squatting 600 pounds, or this person's doing deadlifts with chains and bands. And this is why we use chains and bands. This is why we do good mornings. This is why we do all these movements.
So some of these are dated for like 14 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Looking at
just click that top left one right there. Boom.
Old school.
Yeah. And then we got a band on there, and we got like 600 pounds, and we're doing these like box squats. And
is that Jesse Burdick?
That is Scott Cartwright right there. Yeah.
No, I'm saying in the back.
That was probably me. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
All that might have been Burdick, but everyone's got so many chins that it's hard to like.
So many chins and like a little bit of extra hair.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't like tell anybody from anybody else, but this is just what I love. This is what I enjoyed doing. So I wanted to explain it to people too. And you'll even see videos of me doing stuff from the car, which I'm probably that old guy taking credit for way too many things. But I didn't see a lot of people recording stuff from their car. Now it's pretty common.
Yeah, it's like a device. They're sitting in a parked car pretending.
Yeah, people use the car as like their studio a lot of times.
Quiet.
And I had to do that a lot because I have kids. And so it was the only time I had fucking 5 seconds of myself was when I was in my car. And so I did a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, there's a bunch of videos even of my kids on there. And we had a fun time getting that information out there. But the other thing that we did that I wanted to mention is at first we just recorded the lifts, and then I would go back and I would voice them over. I would talk about them, and I'd give people education. And then I noticed that, and when I watched the videos, I'm like, hey, I remember after that lift, somebody made a really good joke. Where'd that go? And we're like, oh shit, like we missed it. We didn't record that. I'm like, let's keep this shit going. Cause we need to show people that we're happy. Like we look angry. We got all this metal music, and like we're going crazy in here, and we need to show people that we eat donuts and Pop-Tarts and that we have a lot of fun with it.
Now I'm looking at a Pop-Tart video in your face, man. Yeah. Close up.
Just stuffing that Pop-Tart right in there. And I even in this video, I'm talking about how viral the video is going to be.
He talks about how important it is to get these Pop-Tarts in. It's the secret to
oh my God, is that you?
Strength.
That's you right there? Yeah. Oh, geez, I thought it was some random fat guy in the gym came in to steal a Pop-Tart.
That was a random fat guy.
Wow.
You can be that fat guy, folks. Yeah, so I wanted to show the fun that we had with it too, because I think that's an important part that gets lost, and the crazy shit that you were doing with your triathlons and stuff like that. It's like, there's probably a point where you took it too far, where it wasn't really, it got to a point where it was like more heartache and more pain sometimes than it was fun. But in the beginning, you did most of it for like the fun of it, right?
Oh, I think there's always an element of fun to be had. And sometimes you got to get out of your head and get out of your own way and quit feeling sorry for yourself that you took the wrong place in the race, and enjoy the fact that you got flown to the Caribbean to check out some fun island and compete with the best people. But it starts to accumulate. I think the pressures of surrounding world, like you were saying, you guys were just hanging on with your shitty van. And so there is an inclination to start thinking of the economic pressure, especially when you're inventing something. Everyone thinks it's a bad idea, but it's cool that you persevered. And so it pretty much, it sounds like, I would say that took off right away. If you're getting rid of 20,000 units in 1 year, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah. Everyone has a different story, and some people might listen to some parts of that story and be like, I can't do that. That's not my story. I understand that. I'm compassionate for that. I get it. I know that your story may be different. Maybe on the racetrack of life, maybe you feel like you started back a little further. Maybe your parents weren't there for you. Maybe you were abused as a kid, God forbid. There's a lot of nasty things that can happen to people. People grow up differently. They grow up in different areas. It's funny because when you sort of like quote unquote make something of yourself and you're viewed in other people's eyes as being a success, whatever some of that means, you get a lot of people that ask a lot of questions about it. And one thing that's failed over and over and over again to be mentioned about people that are successful is I still think it's the greatest contributing factor to success is your zip code. So, that's it matters where you came from. This like world map, are you from some small African country where the government is different, the religion is different, everything's different? Well, I don't know what that's like to grow up like that, but I would imagine that there would be different challenges, and I would even go as far to say there's probably a lot harder challenges that you may face. And I think it's important to be in recognition of that. I grew up upper middle class. I still had to figure my own life out my own way, but I didn't have a lot of worry and concern. My friends when I was 14, 15 didn't have guns. They weren't selling drugs on the street corner. They're just people that grow up with a lot of horrific situations that they didn't sign up for, but also I didn't sign up to get my parents. I just got really lucky. I have beautiful parents that took care of me and nourished me. And my mom, interesting thing. And one of the reasons why I'm passionate about making this book and to deliver these messages is my mother was strong enough to give me and my brothers a lot of strength and give me and my brothers like an abundance of confidence, maybe too much at sometimes. But she wasn't able to do it for herself because she was abused as a kid. She had a rough upbringing, and that was always kind of in the background. And so she had a hard time overcoming her own emotions and history and background. She basically just kind of always thought she would be, like, kind of in her own words, like a piece of shit. She always thought she was going to be broke, poor, dumb, fat. These things that somebody somewhere along the line, reinforced on her. And even though as she got older and she had a lot of faith and she was very religious and stuff, she could overcome it a little bit, enough here and there for her to strengthen people around her. But she was also still tormented by her own. It was hard for her to get past that, and so I'm very compassionate towards that. And I recognize that people have that. But in helping out, like I've helped out a lot of people that are obese, even including my mother. I've helped her lose weight, a bunch of times. But unfortunately, about 2.5, 3 years ago, we lost her. It's just her health was compromised. And I actually think what killed her was her sleep. I think the lack of sleep over a period of time, because first of all, she didn't look healthy because she was heavy. And as it goes with people that are heavy for a long time, they just kind of get run down over a period of time. But something our boy Russell Buddy mentioned on this podcast before is the thing that a lot of people don't recognize when they're overweight. We talk about the heart, we talk about the kidneys and the liver and the pancreas, secreting enough insulin or too much insulin or becoming insulin resistant, and all these different things. But Russell's like, no one really talks about the joints. And Russell's like, your luck is going to run out. If you're 100 pounds overweight, 200 pounds overweight, 300 pounds, it's just a matter of time. Your joints will wear out, and then you won't have a choice anymore on being able to move or walk or to take ownership. And that's kind of what happened to my mom. She lost weight a couple times, gained some of it back. And then as she got older, she ended up on a walker, and that was the beginning of the end. So regardless of how hard your situation is now, I do think that there is a time where you're going to have to clench your fist and bite down on your mouthpiece and fight for it. I do think there's a time for that. And I don't want to be dismissive of your background. And I also don't want to say I understand it because I only know my own background. But I would love to see you make the first step because I know how important it can be.
Wow, that's a pretty compassionate way to put that motivational message out there. And, we've heard people say, get the fuck over yourself. I don't care how rough you had it. Now it's time to come out there and crush today. And I don't think that's as sensitive to, the hurdles and challenges that we wake up and face every day. The programming's in there and it's hard to extricate. And there's people that came from a comfortable background like you, like I grew up comfortable background, no issues or complaints that I can blame today, but there's a lot of people from that world that
all we can do is maybe nitpick.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sure. Why not?
My dad didn't show up to that one football game.
There was too much smog in Los Angeles. My lungs aren't as strong as they could have been if my parents had moved me somewhere else.
How did they not know about altitude training?
All that stuff. But this stuff can set anybody back, and it's like there's no guarantee. You can make a mess of your life even with all the privileged background or whatever good things you had going for you, and it could be because of mental health issues that you also didn't choose, or doing what the government says with our food, medication, and following the beaten path and not having it come out well. So yeah, it's never too late to turn the corner. And I love how you want people to take those baby steps and not get overwhelmed, because there's another self-defeating prophecy of setting yourself up to lose because you're taking on too daunting of a challenge, or saying, I want to jump like Mark Bell and sell 20,000 units in the first year. I'm going to write it down on a sticky note and put it and look at it every day. Good fucking luck with that, because I don't know if you had your sticky note or not, but the journey has to be kind of from, I think, the most pure and meaningful motivation is you wanted to help other people bench press without pain. You weren't looking at the numbers out of the gate until later. Then you have to. You can call up your accounting friends and father and get that handled. But, your heart's got to be in the right place, I think.
Yeah, and it felt really good to do that. And I kind of feel like my journey's just beginning. I still think there's so much more. There's so much more singing to do, as I like to kind of think of it. And there's so many more things to share with people. And I have a lot of inventions and a lot of ideas. And I don't know if I'll, get around to all of them or half of them. But, hopefully at some point I get most of them out there. But one thing I want to share with people is, regardless of your background, you can kind of think about, again, I like to kind of think about like a commonality, like how do we get closer to the truth? You kind of hear that statement sometimes. How do we get closer to things that are agreeable? And one thing that I think, if you can be reasonable, I think is a great word, if you can be reasonable, you could probably think about the following, and you could think about it in terms of whether or not it's helpful or not. And I think it's helpful in every situation. So what I've learned over the years is that negative emotions, they can only come from one spot. They come from a negative interpretation. And it's like, it's a pretty simple concept to see and to understand, but then to put it into your own life and to try to insert it into your own life all the time and hit the pause button on your emotions is really, it can be really hard. But even in something such as using the word hard, can we try to start to have different communication in our brain about how difficult something is? Because what we know, at least a little bit about running, and I've been running for very long, so I don't know tons about it, but in the little time that I have been doing it, most of the message so far, it's like, take it slow, take it easy. You're going to continue to get better at it. But we see these other messages all the time about the suffering and how hard you got to be, and you got to wake up at 5 a.m. And so the message can get a little fuzzy here and there. But again, if we go back to being reasonable, it's my belief that things usually aren't that hard, because normally you're prepared enough for them because you did something previously that was not too far from what you are doing now. You've been a writer for a really long time, and I don't know how long it dates back to, but I would imagine we can go back in time somewhere and said, Brad, I need you to come in here tomorrow with 10 pages on the Power Project and your thoughts on it, and why it's the best podcast in the world, or whatever it is. Well, nowadays, if you had that assignment, you'd probably have it halfway done by the time. You might talk to your phone on the way home, and then you type it up tonight, and boom, it's done. But there's probably, if you trace it back in time somewhere, you'd be like, Power Project, Mark Bell's Power Project. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can maybe get like 2 pages out about this thing, right? But now you're seasoned and you know how to do it because you practiced it over time, So someone could say, oh yeah, it's hard to get over writer's block, or it's like, it's only so hard until you're all of a sudden writing again.
Yeah.
And you find yourself in a flow state, and I don't know. I think we can just have reinterpretations of stuff. Like, how difficult is something really? Is it really hard? Are Mondays really hard? Or are you shitting me? Are you fucking with me? Like, is Monday actually hard? Is Monday actually harder than Tuesday? If you
believe so, it is.
Right.
You're correct.
Mondays I'm swamped. It's like,
I choose to be swamped. I choose to swamp myself every Monday and complain about it. I choose that.
That's
choice.
That's a much better term, I think.
Mark Bell, killing it. We went all over the place on this, and it was a wild adventure.
Andrew, tell them how they can eat 10 eggs in one day.
One bite at a time.
There we go.
Go to Costco. What do you buy at Costco? What was it, 60 pack?
Yeah, it's 60 pack. Well, because I was telling him I went to a different place that sold like an 84 pack. Like, it was just a big cube.
His son's eating a bunch of eggs now.
My son tears them up. But this lady was like, oh my God, why? Like, what are you going to do with all that? And I'm like, eat them. And she's like all of them? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, how long is that going to last? I'm like, oh, maybe a week. And she's like, just dumbfounded, because I'm like, yeah, it's, between me and my family. And so she asked if I had a big family. I'm like, no. So that's always good too. Yeah.
You're like, they're just going to these biceps.
Yeah. They got to go somewhere, right? So it might as well be biceps.
I love it.
Yeah.
You know what? The other thing is, before we drop off here, I wanted to mention, I love the fact that you have oftentimes given us treats, chocolate and that nut butter that you have.
Brad's macadamia masterpiece.
Oh,
sensational.
That stuff's good.
That stuff's unbelievable.
Just express interest. You'll get more. That's all you got to do.
That stuff's unbelievable. And I think people getting like a little, almost like a hobby with if you get a hobby over certain candies that are too convenient and too easy, you might be making a mistake. But if you get into a hobby of kind of having like fine chocolates and things like that, you'll find yourself, you spend quite a bit of money on these high-end items. You might value them a little bit more, and therefore, hopefully it controls your eating a little bit.
It's a good point. I mean, it's got to be celebratory and mindful and all those great things. And like, we just found out Salt and Straw opened up the ice cream shop in Sacramento here. And, they come from Portland and Seattle, where we're familiar with trying it up there as part of our vacation to go there. Now it's right here in town. That could be dangerous, but like, it's an excursion. It's an outing. You drive there. You're going to enjoy the crap out of it. And it's so different from having your grocery list and throwing in more Ben & Jerry's as a habitual place to go.
I have
every
to
evening.
have that every time I'm watching
and
the ball
not
game.
really enjoying it and savoring it or making the very best choice in that category, because Ben & Jerry's has seed oils in a lot of their flavors. I couldn't believe it. These hippie trippy guys are poisoning us. But if you can go get something that's the highest caliber, like going over to visit grandma and she has fresh baked cookies. Of course you're going to enjoy those. That's different than getting Chips Ahoy at the gas station when you're, pulling over to fuel your car tank and your own tank with crap.
I agree.
We all agree. The 20 Egg Podcast. Thank you for listening.
We're going to go to
exciting
20?
adventures
someday. Well, if I have it for dinner, then I'll probably go 20. Yeah. But yeah,
setting new heights, new record heights.
I got to pee.
Thanks for listening, everybody.